in Phoenix. That was the idea. So their plan was to, as they came to Fairhaven here, this was temporary, their plan was to get over here to Phoenix, because this is where they could safely harbor for the winter, because the winds are coming in this direction. That's why, once again, the route is all underneath these islands, underneath there, because the wind is coming from the north, and they're trying to get out of that as best they can. Yeah, Danny?
So I'm trying to put all this together. So you got a prisoner who needs to go to the highest court or whatever, right? This is how long it always took. I mean, they wanted the winter in Phoenix. I guess the same amount of time you just.
They got caught. They didn't plan to. They wanted to go straight to Rome.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because it seems like quite the adventure for somebody that's like you think would be more timely delivery.
It was.
Okay.
It took much longer than normal. When they left Caesarea, they planned to be in Rome in just a couple of months. Just a matter of a few weeks.
See, that still seems like a lot.
But it'll take them 6 months to get there.
But it usually takes 2.
Something like that, roughly. Yeah. Depending on the winds, the ship, et cetera, how many stops they're going to make. They have to stop and change ships at Myra. So all kinds of factors that are involved. And it's exactly like today. How many people, weird way to word this, how many people go to the airport and get on a plane exactly when it's supposed to leave and go exactly where they're supposed to be and arrive exactly on the right time? Now, there are a lot of people that do, but how many times or what are the chances that the plane is delayed? And it's delayed for this and for that. And then weather, add that to that, oh, we got to do this. Or maybe the place where your destination is, you're flying out of San Diego, sunshine, 70 degrees, but you're flying to Chicago, and it's 20 below. It backs everything up. Talking with years ago, my son Cody, when he started doing these long hauls, he said, "Dad, it's just amazing sometimes that a flight can even leave." He said, "Our checklist is so long, and if there's any one thing that we can't check off," he said, "the plane doesn't move. Everything has to be checked off." And he says, and he just started throwing out all kinds of things that I never thought of. And he said, if that's not there, we're not moving. So that's why he said a delay is not a problem at all, because you got it all together. So they just expect it, and that's part of the nature of the beast. And then when one's delayed, then another, and then they stack up, and you know how all that goes. And so it's amazing how that has been, and it's been here since first century. All kinds of factors come into whether they'll get to Rome on time or not. The Lord told Paul, "You'll get to Rome," but he didn't give Paul a timetable. You'll get there. Now when? There's going to be all kinds of things happening about that. So that's the world that they lived in. We might be able to appreciate that, at least in part, in trying to travel so far in that kind of condition here. So Paul is going to urge them to take some food, and this is where we finished Wednesday night, that in front of all of them, he took some bread here in verse 35, and he gave thanks to God in the presence of them all. And when they all broke it, they began to eat. This is a moment of calm, a moment of quiet, repose, after all of the turmoil and the turbulent weather and the fear and all of the anxiety and pressure that is going over all these people. They're going to run aground, but in the middle of this, when they know they're getting ready to run into the rocks, Paul says, "Everybody, let's sit down and let's have something to eat." I'm thinking, okay, there'll be time for that when we get on shore. Right now, I want to get off this ship. They don't do that. Paul is the example now. Paul is setting the example, and he's setting the agenda. He's showing these men, this is what we need to do. If you stay here on the ship, not not a hair will be lost. John?
Along with, he has been correct about everything, every step so far, he's been correct.
Right.
All right, okay. If we'd listened to him in the beginning, we'd just be floating in Fairhaven having a good time. But no, we had to go think for ourselves, and now we're here.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I would think that the guy who knew every step, you gotta know the next one.
Interesting to think about. I know that you start getting into the hypotheticals, but had they stayed at Fairhaven through the winter, none of this drama and trauma would have happened. They could have let the winter pass and then just smooth sailing right on into Rome. But that was not going to be the will of God. We see the hand of God all over this. That no, they're going to go out there. Paul will tell them you should stay here, but they, on their own, quote, wisdom, they're going to move out there. And that puts them in a situation where they're going to learn a pretty strong lesson about God and about Paul's God, about what Paul is doing, etc. So that wouldn't have happened if it stayed safe. It's, pardon me, my 45-second sermon. It's never in times of peace that we learn or grow. It just doesn't happen. The fact of the matter is, when things are difficult, when there is conflict, when there is opposition, when there is a force working against what is right and we have to fight our way through that, that's where we grow. That's where we learn. It's always been that way. It's not convenient. But James himself, at the beginning of his letter, when he said, brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials and temptations, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience. That's a lesson right off the top. James says, don't get upset when things are difficult in these trials. He said, be glad, rejoice. Now you're going to learn something. Now we're going to grow. We're going to build in patience. The old saying, if you pray for patience, you're asking for trouble. Because that's how it comes. So they have been through quite an ordeal here, and now these are going to be different men who get off the ship than those who got on it in Caesarea. Their lives are going to be dramatically affected by this, by Paul, by the events from the hand of God. And so, verse 38, pardon me. So when they had eaten enough, they lightened the ship and threw out the wheat into the sea. Now we're going to have the shipwreck. We're going to go into this spot right here. Verse 39, when it was day, they did not recognize the land, but they observed a bay with a beach, onto which they planned to run the ship, if possible. And they let go the anchors and left them in the sea. We're not going to need these anymore. This ship's not going to make it. Meanwhile, loosing the rudder ropes, and they hoisted the mainsail to the wind and made for shore. Now, I don't understand this verse. Earlier, they threw the tackle overboard. Now, evidently, whatever that tackle was didn't prevent them from raising the sail here. So, what other tackle would there be? I don't know. I don't know what all it would be involved in that. But whatever it was that it was the general design of the boats back then, that they would have double rudders, one of each corner of the stern, and they would drop them in the water. So when they raised the rudder, they pushed the levers down inside the boat to raise the rudder up out of the water, and that's what kept them from going back and forth, supposedly. Here now, they loose those, they drop the rudders down into the water, and they raise the sail, so they're going to get some power going, and they're just going to run this thing right into the beach. And that's their plan. How they did that, I don't know. It's just interesting to think about how much of the, quote, tackle they threw overboard. They left some of it, obviously, so that they could raise mainsail. And so however that happened, they hoisted the mainsail and made for shore. Verse 41, but striking a place where two seas met, they ran the ship aground, and the prow stuck fast and remained unmovable. But the stern was being broken up by the violence of the waves. You see the picture here. They ran that thing up and the bow just stuck right into the beach there, wherever it was. But the back end that no longer has the anchors to hold it is just being broke up. And it's a place where two seas were meeting. Some of the most treacherous places on the globe are places like Cape Horn, the bottom where the two oceans meet, and they meet like that. You have a force from opposite directions. Anybody here older than me? No. Anybody here as old as me? Anybody here who's lived in Southern California most of their life? Do you recognize the term, or have ever heard of the wedge? You know what the wedge is?
Up north, the break.
Keep going.
Yeah, it's where the crazy wave slams some people.
Yeah.
They try to surf it. They get beat up.
You ever been there?
No, I've seen plenty of videos.
I did there. It spit me out like a little puppy. The wedge is at Newport Beach, and it was artificially created by when they built a jetty to protect the harbor at Newport Beach. They put it out at a 45-degree angle, and what they didn't count on is that on the other side of the jetty, when the waves start getting really good size, they would hit the jetty and then bounce off and then hit the other waves from the other side, and they would collide about 30 feet from shore. And so you would have, say, there was an 8 to 10 foot swell in a good time. They'll hit and they would at least double. They would go to 20, 25 feet, and just in a short place. And when I was in college, I'd heard about it. I thought, that'd be fun. And one day I was on the beach, and these guys said, hey, it's up at the wedge. I'm going. We got there, and it was the strangest sight I'd ever seen. I thought, man, this is really wild. They were larger than this building, of course, and got in that thing, and it spits you out on about 10 inches of water. It pulls all the water up and then throws you out there. And a lifeguard, they don't have lifeguards there, but a guy who was started running up and said, anybody who doesn't know what they're doing, get out of the water right now. And I thought, that's me. You know, and just watching the power, the waves would leap up, and you'd see, it looked like Egyptian hieroglyphics. All these bodies that are inside the water trying to get out. It was just the weirdest thing. But realizing that, how would you sail through that? How would you survive that? Now you've got two major movements of water here meeting at this island, and that boat doesn't have a chance. And it's got to be a fairly significant sized boat, because 276 men are on board. And so they, here they go. It starts breaking up. But verse 43, now the soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners, lest any of them should swim away and escape. That's odd. Some of these men were trying to escape on their own, but now they see an opportunity where the prisoners would escape, and so they're not going to be held liable for that. We all know the law of Rome, that if you let your prisoner escape from you, it was capital punishment. They would take your life. And they were afraid of that. So they're going to go just preempt any problem by just killing all of these prisoners here. But verse 43, the centurion wanting to save Paul. Now, it's not that he's saying, now fellas, come on, let's use some common sense about this. This is pretty extreme. It's none of that. Luke says his sole objective was, I'm going to save Paul. Now they're going to kill them all. One of the group is God's minister. God's, if I can use the word angel, because that's what the word angel means. We think of something supernatural and created and that is one of the definitions for the word. But John the Baptist was called an angel because he was basically a messenger. And that's what that angelos means. And so here is God's messenger in a group of all of these prisoners, and they're going to kill them all. And someone steps forward to save Paul. Very similar to, here is God's messenger, Moses, and Pharaoh's going to kill them all. The one man is saved. Here is God's son, and Herod is going to kill them all. And his mother and father take him to Egypt and is saved. You see that theme there? Repeated. God is sending a man. God is sending a messenger. Here's his one. And the authorities want them dead and will go to extreme measures to make sure that to get them, we're going to kill everybody. This is the same thing in principle. We're going to kill all the prisoners. We're going to kill all the Hebrew babies, 2 years and younger, so we can get Moses, so we can get Jesus, so we can get Paul. You know, that kind of mentality. But the centurion is going to save Paul. And he kept them from their purpose and commanded that those who could swim should jump overboard first and get to land. So here is now the official permission. The centurion says, okay, evidently they're close enough to land, be it this harbor or maybe another one around on this island, wherever it may be. You guys jump on, you guys who can swim, go. I don't know, I've never really thought about this, but I wondered how many people in the first century knew how to swim. Were there swimming events in the ancient Olympics? I think there were, I don't know. But here it is, if they're sailors, they should all know how to swim. But a bunch of these are prisoners. They don't know how to swim. So however that dynamic may be in the demographics of who can and who can't swim, the centurion says everyone who can should jump overboard and get to land. And the rest, some on boards and some on broken pieces of the ship. And so it was that they all escaped safely to the land. So those who could swim, swam ashore. And the others just grabbed pieces of the ship, boards, things like that, and use those to float and make it to shore. So it likely was not very far that they had to go, but it was still very dangerous, and I'm sure they were very worried about how this was going to work out, how this was going to go here. Any question or comment about what we've read here so far in the 27th chapter here? So they're going to make it to Malta. Now, what is going to happen at Malta? Verse 1 says, now when they had escaped, they then found out that the island was called Malta. And the natives showed us unusual kindness, for they kindled a fire and made us all welcome because of the rain that was falling and because of the cold. It's in the winter. The rain is falling. The air is cool, so it all is going to be hydrated with cold water, so everything's going to be cold. They're wet. They got to get out of the wet clothes and try to dry off, so the natives build them a fire. Now, the question would come up, how often would Malta see a ship coming to that bay? I don't know. That's an interesting thought, or was this an unusual occurrence? Hey, what is this? Look at these people coming. They're gathering. I don't know. You know, today, cruise ships, when they come into a port of call, everybody opens their doors, all the shops are open, and they love the people coming in. So here's some kind of native welcome that they're all going to experience, and very quickly the people will hone in on Paul and see Paul. He doesn't have a special uniform like a centurion, but they're going to see how these men defer to Paul and the persona, the authority that Paul has there. And verse 3, this is how it's going to happen. When Paul had gathered a bundle of sticks. Now, wait a minute. He's a prisoner. But they've already let the prisoners go. overboard and said, you guys are going to swim, go on. The rest of you, get a piece of wood or something, and we'll all make it to shore. Now, when they get to shore, there has to be some kind of organization. The guards are going to get all the fellas together, no doubt take a head count, say, all right, who's missing? We got all these people right here. But there's some latitude. Paul's over here picking up some firewood. They're not chained up in some stereotypical way, but he's gathering a bundle of sticks here in verse 3, and he laid them on the fire, and when he did that, a viper came out because of the heat and fastened on his hand. A viper would be the type of snake that would be the most poisonous, and when it latched on his hand, everyone would recognize that this is certain death. Some snakes, their poison is far more lethal than others. I know we sometimes think of rattlesnakes. That I don't know. Anybody here been bit by a rattlesnake? We're out quail hunting in the desert one time years ago, and we came across, there was an old man sitting out there in the desert with his young son. And so what happened? Well, he just got bit by a rattlesnake, and he was just sitting there. They go, oh, okay, sure enough, there it was. Come on in, Al. We're in Acts chapter 28 now. Yeah. You think, okay, this guy's dead. We were 30 miles from town, and they put him in a truck and drove him in. We stopped off at the hospital. Oh yeah, he's fine. Yeah, well, he was one tough old bird, or that was one weak little snake. I don't know, but there clearly was the spot on his leg there where you could see where the snake got him. And his young son was just all very upset. And I was too. I thought, man, we got to get this guy out of here. And another fella said, we've got some time. Now, we don't want to waste time, but let's just get him going. Don't get excited. Get him in the truck, and we'll drive him out here. And he made it. This is a different kind of snake. This is a viper that, when it latches on, that's it. That's pretty much, they don't have antidotes for it. And they don't think they have a snake bite kit, something like that. So he fastened on his hand. In verse 4, when the natives saw the creature hanging from his hand, it's like Paul is, hey, you guys, do you see this? Hey, and he's not in a hurry to take the snake off. It's just there. It's hanging on. When they see that, they said to one another, no doubt this man is a murderer, whom though he had escaped the sea, yet justice does not allow him to live. That's their summation. They've supposed that, okay, he has committed a capital crime, and in their mind it's murder. And though he might have escaped justice, though he might escape the sea, the justice is not going to let him live. But then he shook off the creature into the fire and suffered no harm. He just threw it off, just like nothing. And so when he did that, verse 6, they were expecting that he would swell up or suddenly fall down dead. Interesting, swell up or one of those two, or maybe a combination, and suddenly fall down dead. But after they had looked for a long time and saw no harm come to him, they changed their minds and said that he was a god. Talk about a flip-flop. He goes from, all right, this was one bad dude, that the snake got him. He was a murderer, and he deserves what he gets. So we're all going to sit back and just watch him die, and we're not going to have any compassion or concern for this man dying, because no doubt he was a murderer who escaped the sea, but justice. And this is how they saw it. They wouldn't call it providence, but they would call it justice. Nature has come after him, and now he's a dead man. Okay, so they're just sitting back waiting for it to happen. And then when it doesn't happen, well, maybe he's not a murderer. Well, maybe he's lucky. No. He's more powerful than that snake. Who could be more powerful than nature? It's got to be a god. He's a god. Yes, that's what it is. He's a god. So how quickly the rationale will swing from one extreme to another. And now they're going to treat him like a god. So verse 7, now in the region there was an estate of the leading citizen of the island, whose name was Publius, who received us and entertained us courteously for 3 days. So they've come here, and they're going to be on a little longer, but for 3 days they are being entertained by this leading citizen. And it happened that the father of Publius lay sick of a fever and dysentery. Paul went in to him and prayed, and he laid his hands on him and healed him. So when this was done, the rest of those on the island who had diseases also came and were healed. Look how quickly the dynamics change here on this island that they were shipwrecked on. Paul is thought to be this criminal, then he's thought to be a god, and then all of a sudden, if he's a god, we can use you over here. You've all heard of probably Doctors Without Borders. You've heard of that, where doctors from countries around the world will go to third world countries and help them. We had this event happen a number of times. Pardon me. When we were in Africa, one night we had checked into this little very primitive hotel, and there were these UN charitable Land Cruisers. You've seen it. The UN is kind of a light baby blue, and these other charitable organizations, they'll paint them different colors. But there are Land Cruisers by the thousands all over Africa. They're everywhere. And they all come to help the people. This is a group of doctors that came into the hotel and said, we're going to set up a clinic tomorrow, and we got to get some rest, because when the word gets out, we'll never be able to get away. When word gets out that there's a doctor, quote unquote, and all he has to do is just be a paramedic. Doesn't have, you brought supplies with you, they will line up and stay in line for days just to get medical help, because that's the only medical help they would have. So this one doctor warned me. I said, well, I could do a little bit of this. We got some stuff. He said, well, if you do that, just get ready, because they will not leave you. You will be there until you drop. That's just how that's going to work. And this is in a similar fashion. They're isolated on this island, and they don't. Where's the medical help? They'll have a witch doctor of some kind and use some primitive potions, etc. Paul comes in now. He clearly is a power above nature, as he shook off that snake. And now Publius says, my father's sick. I want you to come see him. So Paul prays over him and lays his hands on him. And verse 8, he healed him. So verse 9, when this was done, the rest of those on the island who had diseases also came and were healed. So here's a long line of these people from Malta, the Maltesans, that they have come now to be healed. And verse 10 says, they also honored us in many ways, and when we departed, they provided such things as were necessary to a people who have very little, and something extraordinary is done for them in a medical way or in a spiritual way. They can't thank you enough. They do not have enough to give you that they would be satisfied in being able to adequately thank whoever it is that's helping them. And that's been this case since long before the first century. And so this is what's happening. They're becoming the recipients of all this goodwill. If you are a soldier in this group of 100 under the centurion, you're watching this. You're seeing this. What are you thinking right now about Paul? You've been with him since Caesarea. You've been with him since Festus. Since Festus said, all right, he gets to go to Rome. Now you've been with him through all of this trial so far. The voyage, the shipwreck, and now the healing. What are you thinking about Paul right now? Has your mind changed any? about who he is, what he's doing? John?
It may not even be Paul that you're focusing on, it's Paul's God. And obviously delivered him through all these things. And Paul's still standing, and Paul never got concerned, never was distraught. He's just always Paul. So I would think, he would think, how do I get that? Let me ask Paul, how do I get that?
Right. Was there another hand over here somewhere? Yeah, Al?
Although I haven't heard all the lessons, but one of the things that has impressed me about Paul is that God shows him from the opposite end of the good. He was bad. God chose him, and through him, he worked everything. I mean, what a miracle that is. He can do that with Paul, he can do that with me.
Right. Was there another hand? Barry?
If it's me, I'm thinking I want Paul in the next battle I'm in with me.
Right. Yeah.
When I get stabbed, he can fix it.
Well, let's think back to Caesarea. Think back to Caesarea when Paul is finally given an audience before King Agrippa. And he's glad because he said, Agrippa, you know my people, you know our traditions and customs, etc. And the point that he is making to all of these officials, he made it first to Felix, then Festus, and now Agrippa, is that the reason he has been taken prisoner is not that he has done anything, though they would try to frame him on blaspheming the temple. But he makes it very specific that the reason I've been taken captive and they want to kill me is because I am preaching this God that was their God and his prophets and now his son. And I'm following this God. And this God that I am following, that they are aware of, but they can't follow him. This is the God I follow. And because I follow him, this is why I am in trouble with the Roman government. But I will obey God and follow him the rest of my life. Well, as he's going through this journey here now, who's saving him? It's his God. To John's point is that, well, not so much about Paul, it's about his God. That's it. They're looking at this now, and they're not only looking at Paul with different eyes as someone who sure has some powers. He is constantly giving the praise and the glory and the credit to God. This is the God that you should be serving. And if you serve this God, you can be delivered also. You're just seeing a graphic demonstration of this power. Okay, Rodney and then Warren.
I'm wondering if, since Paul was there for 3 months, if they built a church, and if those islanders started worshiping God, because they had to have a chance of like, hey, this guy is, he's special. So we want to be part of that special whatever it is. And had a church there. I don't know who's been in Malta, but I would have went to that church if I was an islander and I was healed by this stranger and shook off a viper and all these stories going around. I would want to be part of that church.
I think that's right. Though the text does not tell us, I think that's exactly what happened. But let me qualify that. When we say in our thinking today that, well, they built a church there, we think of some kind of structure. They didn't have a structure, didn't need a structure. But at a certain place on the first day of the week, they were all coming together to worship God and to observe the Lord's Supper and to pray to him and thank him for what he's done. The gospel is being preached. So it could be on the shore, it could be up on the hill, it could be anywhere. But the assembling of a group of people who would obey the gospel, in that sense, yes, I think there's little doubt that Paul established a church there in Malta, and long after he's gone, they kept that. Warren?
If any of those Romans had any doubt about that God, I mean, they were probably mad that their God, the Roman god Jupiter,
Yeah.
shipwrecked them, put them in bad weather, and then this other God that Paul preached saved them, healed them. So he was building his church
your God too. All right, we'll pick up there Wednesday night.
I used to, but I can't remember.
You're running.